The emergency beacon cut through the void of space like a knife through silk, its distress signal pulsing with desperate urgency across multiple frequencies. In the outer rim of the sector, where space pirates and smugglers typically ruled the darkness, something had gone terribly wrong. Captain of the Consortium monitoring station picked up the signal first. His four eyes widened as the translation algorithms worked overtime to decode the primitive transmission. The signal was crude, almost archaic by galactic standards, using electromagnetic waves instead of the quantum entanglement networks that civilized species employed. "By the 7 moons," muttered, his scales shifting from blue to deep purple in confusion. "This can't be right." The message was simple, repeated endlessly in what appeared to be hundreds of different mathematical and linguistic formats. "SOS, SOS, this is Earth. We are under attack, requesting immediate assistance. Coordinates follow, SOS." Earth, secondary brain processed the name while his primary consciousness stared at the tactical display. Every civilized being in the galaxy knew that name, whispered in the dark corners of space stations, and mentioned only in hushed tones in the deepest archives of the Galactic Council. Earth was the death world, the planet of nightmares, home to the humans. For 3,000 galactic standard years, the Galactic Council had maintained a strict quarantine around the Sol system. It wasn't just protocol, it was survival. Humans were the most dangerous species ever, capable of violence and destruction on a scale that comprehension. They had been contained on there after first contact had gone catastrophically wrong, leaving entire fleets of exploratory vessels as drifting debris. The official records stated that humans were too aggressive, too unpredictable, too fundamentally violent to be allowed into galactic society. They bred like parasites, fought like demons, and showed a complete disregard for their own mortality that made them the stuff of nightmares for every other sapient species in the known galaxy. But now they were calling for help. His claws trembled as he forwarded the signal to the nearest galactic patrol station. Within minutes, his communication array lit up like a festival display as responses flooded in from across the sector. "Station, this is Admiral of the 7th Fleet. Confirm that transmission origin. We're reading impossible coordinates." "Confirmed, Admiral. Signal originates from Sol 3, the human, the quarantine zone." A long pause followed. When Admiral's voice returned, it carried the weight of someone who had just received news of their own execution. By the eternal void, what could possibly threaten them badly enough to make them call for help? That question rippled through space faster than the original distress call. Within hours, it had reached the highest levels of galactic government. Emergency sessions were called. Ancient protocols were dusted off and studied. For the first time the galaxy's greatest minds were forced to contemplate a question that no one had ever wanted to consider. What if something existed that could threaten humanity? On the capital world of Prime, the Galactic Council convened in emergency session. Representatives from 200 species filled the massive amphitheater, their various breathing apparatus, gravity compensators, and translation devices creating a symphony of mechanical humming. High Counselor, a member of the ancient and wise ethereal race, called the session to order with a gesture of his 6-fingered hand. His voice, transmitted through quantum resonance, reached every corner of the chamber. "Fellow beings, we face an unprecedented situation. The quarantined species of Sol 3 has transmitted a distress signal requesting aid against an unknown threat." A cacophony of responses erupted from the assembly. Fear, confusion, and heated debate in dozens of languages filled the air until restored order. "The question before us is simple," he continued. "Do we respond to this call for help?" Ambassador K of the Draconian Empire rose from her delegation section, her serpentine form towering above the others. "High Counselor, with respect, the question is not simple at all. The humans were quarantined for excellent reasons. They represent an existential threat to galactic civilization. To approach their system would be suicide." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the assembly. Ambassador K was right, and everyone knew it. The humans' reputation was built on 3 of terrifying legends and carefully documented atrocities. "But consider this," interrupted Ambassador N of the Harmonious Collective, his mechanical voice cutting through the noise. "What manner of threat could force such beings to request assistance? Our studies suggest that humans would rather die fighting than admit weakness. If they are calling for help, then whatever threatens them must be beyond our current understanding of cosmic dangers. The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. Every species present had their own nightmares about humanity, but the idea of something that could threaten them was even more terrifying. High Counselor accessed the classified archives, his consciousness briefly touching the quantum data streams that contained humanity's file. The images and reports that flowed through his mind made his ethereal form flicker with distress. Humans were bipedal mammals from a high-gravity world with a corrosive atmosphere and violent weather patterns. They orbited an unstable star and was regularly bombarded by cosmic radiation that would kill most species within hours. Yet they thrived there. They had evolved not just to survive on their death world, but to actively enjoy its dangers. They practiced something called extreme sports, deliberately putting themselves in mortal peril for entertainment. They consumed poison, alcohol recreationally. They kept predators as companions and called them pets. Their children played games that would constitute military training for most species. But it was their capacity for violence that truly set them apart. Humans had weaponized everything from rocks to the fundamental forces of reality itself. They could turn farming tools into instruments of death, household chemicals into explosives, and their own bodies into weapons. They had a documented history of warfare spanning their entire recorded civilization, fighting over resources, territory, ideology, and sometimes for no discernible reason at all. Most terrifying of all, they had something called pack bonding. Humans could form emotional attachments to almost anything: other humans, animals, inanimate objects, even abstract concepts. When those bonds were threatened, humans became capable of feats that biological possibility. There were reports of humans lifting vehicles off trapped companions, fighting for days with mortal wounds, or throwing themselves into certain death to protect others. A single human was dangerous. A group of humans was a natural disaster. An organized military force of humans was a galactic extinction event waiting to happen. "We cannot ignore this," said Ambassador of the Crystalline Hegemony, her silicon-based form resonating with harmonic frequencies. "If something threatens humanity, it threatens us all by extension. We must at least investigate." "Investigate?" Ambassador K's scales flushed red with alarm. "You propose sending ships to the Sol system. That's not investigation, that's suicide with extra steps." "Then what do you suggest?" Ambassador N challenged. "We ignore this and hope it goes away. What if this threat spreads beyond the Sol system?" The debate continued for hours, with fear and pragmatism warring against curiosity and responsibility. Finally, High Counselor called for order once again. "We will send a small reconnaissance force," he announced. 3 ships, volunteers only, with skeleton crews. Their mission is to observe and report, nothing more. Under no circumstances are they to make contact with the humans or offer assistance unless absolutely necessary. As the council session ended, and representatives began filing out to arrange this suicide mission, none of them noticed the small, unassuming figure in the observation gallery. Ambassador Sarah, the only human to ever set foot on Prime, had been listening to every word through the translation implants that the council had required her to use during the failed first contact attempts 3 ago. She smiled grimly as she activated her own communication device, sending a coded message to coordinates that no galactic database contained. "This is Ambassador to Fleet Command. The Council has taken the bait. 3 ships incoming to Sol system for reconnaissance. Recommend we prepare for Phase 2 of the operation." The response came back immediately. "Understood, Ambassador. The Admiral says to remind you, make it convincing. The galaxy needs to believe we're genuinely in trouble, at least until we're ready to reveal the truth." Sarah nodded to herself as she made her way through the crystal corridors of the Council building. For 3,000 years, humanity had been playing the long game, allowing themselves to be quarantined while they developed technologies that would make the rest of the galaxy's weapons look like stone knives. They had let the other species believe humans were primitive, violent, and contained. Now it was time for the galaxy to learn what humans could really do when they put their minds to it. The distress signal wasn't a call for help. It was an invitation to a demonstration that would change the balance of power in the galaxy forever. But first, they had to sell the performance. The 3 reconnaissance ships would find exactly what they expected to find: humans in desperate trouble, fighting against impossible odds. What they wouldn't realize until it was too late was that the attacking force threatening Earth was entirely under human control. The greatest predators in the galaxy were about to discover that they had never been the hunters at all. They had been the prey from the very beginning, and now the trap was finally ready to spring. As Sarah made her way to her ship for the journey back to Sol system, she couldn't help but smile at the irony. The galaxy feared humans for their capacity for violence and destruction. They were about to learn that humanity's true weapon had never been their ability to break things. It was their ability to think 10 moves ahead, while making their enemies believe they were barely surviving move 1. The reconnaissance force would arrive within days, expecting to find a desperate, dying world. Instead, they would find the most elaborate military deception in galactic history, and by the time they realized what was happening, it would be far too late to warn anyone else. The age of human quarantine was about to end, and the age of human ascendancy was about to begin. The 3 reconnaissance ships dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Sol system, their crews barely breathing as they found themselves in the most forbidden region of known space. The GSV Cautious Inquiry, the GSV Silent Observer, and the GSV Distant Hope represented the bravest, or most foolish, volunteers from across galactic civilization. Captain K of the fleet commanded the small task force from aboard the Cautious Inquiry. His crystalline carapace was cycling through stress patterns as he studied the sensor readings that made no sense whatsoever. "Report," he ordered, his voice transmitted through harmonic resonance to avoid electromagnetic signatures that might alert the humans to their presence. "Sir," replied his science officer, a nervous named M, "the system is wrong, all of it." "Elaborate." M's tentacles writhed with anxiety as she processed the data. "The star is stable, sir. Our records indicated it should be a violent, unpredictable variable star that regularly bombards its planets with lethal radiation. Instead, it's showing perfect stellar equilibrium." "Continue." "The asteroid belt between the 4th and 5th planets, sir. It's not random debris, it's organized. The asteroids are moving in precise formations, and we're detecting massive artificial structures throughout the belt." Captain K felt his carapace shift to the deep blue of profound confusion. "Artificial structures." "Defensive platforms, sir. Weapon systems of unknown design. They're dormant, but the energy signatures are unlike anything in our databases. And, sir," M paused, her voice dropping to barely a whisper, "they're pointed outward, away from the inner system." The implications hit the bridge crew like a physical blow. If the humans had weapons platforms in their asteroid belt and those weapons were pointed away from there, it meant they weren't built to keep invaders out. They were built to keep something else in. "What about the distress signal?" Kay asked, though he was beginning to suspect he wouldn't like the answer. "Still transmitting, sir. But we're also picking up massive energy discharges from the 3rd planet. Whatever is attacking Earth is using weapons that make our most powerful naval guns look like children's toys." On the bridge of the Silent Observer, captain of the Ethereal Consortium was having a similar conversation with her crew. The elegant, translucent beings were flickering with patterns of fear and confusion as they processed sensor data that challenged everything they thought they knew about the Sol system. "Captain," reported her tactical officer, "we're detecting signs of massive industrial activity on the 4th planet, Mars, according to our historical records." "What kind of activity?" "Terraforming, sir. The atmosphere is being systematically modified, but not for human habitation. The gas mix suggests it's being prepared for an ethereal physiology." Captain's form flickered with shock. "That's impossible. Humans can't know our biological requirements. We've had no contact for 3. "There's more, sir. We're detecting similar preparations on the moons of the 5th planet, Jupiter. Multiple environments being created, all suitable for different galactic species." Meanwhile, aboard the Distant Hope, captain of the Draconian Empire was discovering the most disturbing data of all. His serpentine form coiled with tension as his crew reported their findings. "Captain," hissed his communications officer, "we're intercepting human military transmissions. They're not trying to hide them." "What are they saying?" "The language is archaic, but our translation systems are managing. They're coordinating a defensive action against something they call the Devourers." "Sir, The tactical data they're transmitting suggests they're facing an enemy with technology far beyond anything in our databases. Show me. The main display lit up with intercepted human communications. The tactical situation that emerged was a nightmare scenario. Earth was under siege by an unknown alien force that seemed to consume everything in its path. The attackers' ships were massive, organic-looking things that absorbed energy weapons and converted matter into more ships. But what made Captain Scales turn pale was the human response. Instead of the primitive warfare they expected, the humans were demonstrating military coordination and technological sophistication that rivaled the greatest galactic civilizations. "Sir," his tactical officer whispered, "the humans aren't losing this battle, they're winning." The three reconnaissance ships maintained their position at the system's edge, afraid to venture closer, but unable to look away from the impossible spectacle unfolding before them. Everything they thought they knew about humans was being systematically destroyed by each new sensor reading. Then the Sol system's defense grid activated. What the reconnaissance crews witnessed next would haunt their dreams for the rest of their lives. The random asteroid belt suddenly revealed itself to be the most sophisticated defensive network ever conceived. Thousands of hidden weapons platforms emerged from camouflaged asteroids, their targeting systems locking onto threats throughout the system. But the weapons themselves were beyond comprehension. Instead of energy beams or kinetic projectiles, the platforms fired something that could only be described as weaponized spacetime. Reality itself twisted and warped around their targets, creating zones where physics behaved according to human design rather than natural law. The alien attackers, the devourers that were supposedly overwhelming Earth, began to retreat. But as they fled, the reconnaissance crews realized something that made their previous fear seem quaint by comparison. The attacking ships weren't alien at all. They were human constructs, elaborate theater designed to justify what came next. From the outer planets, massive fleets began to emerge. Not primitive human vessels, but ships that incorporated technology from every known galactic civilization and then improved upon it. The hulls were crafted from materials that shouldn't exist, powered by energy sources that known physics, and armed with weapons that seemed pulled from the fevered nightmares of military scientists. Captain K was the first to understand what they were witnessing. "By the eternal void," he whispered, his carapace cycling through every stress pattern his species had evolved. "This isn't a battle, it's a demonstration." As if responding to his words, the human fleet began to move with precision that no military force should possess. Ship formations that would have taken galactic admirals years to perfect were executed flawlessly by crews who seemed to anticipate each other's actions with supernatural accuracy. Then the communications began. "Attention unidentified vessels at system periphery," came a voice in perfect galactic standard, spoken with an accent that suggested the speaker had been born to the language rather than learned it. "This is Admiral Sarah of the United Earth Defense Force. We are aware of your presence and welcome your observation of our defensive exercise." The three captains looked at each other through their communication links, seeing their own terror reflected in their colleagues' faces. The humans not only knew they were there, but had apparently been expecting them. "We understand that our request for assistance may have caused some concern in the galactic community," Admiral continued, her voice carrying across space with crystalline clarity. "Allow us to clarify the situation." The human fleet began to reform, their movements creating patterns in space that were somehow both beautiful and menacing. As they moved, the attacking force completed its retreat, vanishing into the outer system where long-range sensors couldn't track them. For 3,000 years, we have honored the quarantine imposed by the Galactic Council. We accepted isolation as the price of peace. During this time, we have not been idle. One of the human vessels, a ship larger than most space stations, suddenly appeared directly between the reconnaissance fleet and the inner system. It had moved faster than light without any of the exotic signatures associated with known FTL technology. "We have studied every aspect of galactic civilization through methods that we will not detail at this time. We have learned your languages, your cultures, your technologies, and your fears. We have prepared for the day when isolation would no longer serve either humanity's interests or those of the galaxy as a whole." The massive human ship began to broadcast holographic displays that showed the reconnaissance crews exactly what humanity had been doing during their quarantine. The images revealed a transformation so complete and so terrifying that several crew members on the galactic ships simply collapsed from sensory overload. Earth was not the primitive world they had expected. It was the center of an interstellar empire that spanned multiple star systems, all carefully hidden from galactic sensors. Humanity had not been contained by the quarantine. They had used it as camouflage while building the most advanced civilization in known space. "The distress signal you received was not a request for rescue," Admiral continued, her voice now carrying an undertone that made the listening aliens' survival instincts scream warnings. "It was an invitation to witness our capabilities firsthand." The holographic displays showed human colonies on worlds that supposedly could not support life, human fleets patrolling regions of space that galactic civilization had never explored, and human technologies that made the greatest achievements of galactic science look like children's toys. "We are no longer content with isolation," Admiral announced. "Humanity is ready to take its place in galactic civilization, not as subjects or supplicants, but as the dominant species we were always destined to become." The reconnaissance ship's crews watched in mounting horror as the truth of their situation became clear. They had not come to rescue a desperate world. They had been lured into a trap by beings so far beyond their understanding that the comparison was like insects trying to comprehend orbital mechanics. "You will return to your respective governments," Admiral continued, "and you will deliver a message. Humanity offers the galaxy a choice. Join us willingly and benefit from technologies that will transform civilization itself. Resist us and discover why we were quarantined in the first place." The massive human ship began to fade from normal space, demonstrating technology that allowed it to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously. As it vanished, its final transmission carried a weight that seemed to crush the spirits of everyone who heard it. "The age of human isolation is over. The age of human dominance has begun. Choose wisely." The three reconnaissance ships were left alone at the edge of the Sol system, their crews struggling to process what they had witnessed. They had come expecting to find a desperate world under attack. Instead, they had discovered that the most dangerous predators in the galaxy had been playing a game 3,000 years in the making, and they had just announced checkmate. As they prepared to leave the system with news that would shatter everything the galaxy thought it knew about reality, none of them noticed the subtle modifications that had been made to their ship's computer systems during their visit. Humanity's message would be delivered exactly as intended, but it would not be the only thing returning to galactic space. Hidden in their data banks, dormant but ready to activate, were pieces of human technology that would soon begin the quiet integration of human systems into galactic infrastructure. The invasion had already begun. It was just proceeding so subtly that its victims wouldn't realize they were conquered until the transformation was complete. The emergency session of the Galactic Council convened just 6 hours after the reconnaissance ships returned from the Sol system. The great amphitheater on Prime had never seen such chaos. Representatives from 200 species spoke simultaneously in dozens of languages, their translators overwhelmed by the cacophony of panic and disbelief. High Counselor struggled to maintain order as Captain K delivered his report. The crystalline's carapace had remained locked in stress patterns since his return, and his voice carried the hollow tone of someone whose worldview had been completely shattered. "The humans are not what we believed them to be," K stated, his words causing fresh waves of agitation throughout the assembly. "They are not primitive. They are not contained. They have been using the quarantine as cover while building a civilization that surpasses our own in every measurable way." Ambassador K of the Draconian Empire rose from her delegation section, her serpentine form towering with indignation. "This is impossible. Our monitoring systems would have detected any expansion beyond there." "No, Ambassador," interrupted Captain of the Ethereal Consortium, her translucent form flickering with patterns of barely controlled terror. "Their technology is beyond our ability to detect. They've been watching us for 3 while remaining completely invisible to our sensors." The chamber erupted into fresh arguments as the implications sank in. If humanity could hide entire star systems from galactic observation, what else might they be capable of? High Counselor accessed the quantum data streams, reviewing the reconnaissance reports in real time. The evidence was overwhelming and terrifying. Humanity had not just survived their quarantine, they had used it to become the galaxy's apex predator while allowing their prey to believe they were the ones in control. "Show them the recordings," captain of the Draconian fleet commanded from his position at the witness stand. His scales had turned the deep black of mortal fear, a condition that his species hadn't experienced in over 2,000 years. The main holographic display activated, showing the assembled delegates exactly what the reconnaissance teams had witnessed in the Sol system. The transformation from desperate world under attack to demonstration of overwhelming military superiority played out in perfect detail. When Admiral Sarah's final message echoed through the chamber, the age of human isolation is over. The age of human dominance has begun. Choose wisely, the silence that followed was absolute. It was broken by Ambassador N of the Harmonious Collective, his mechanical voice cutting through the stunned quiet. 3,000 years. They've been planning this for 3,000 years. Planning what? Demanded Ambassador of the Crystalline Hegemony, her silicon form resonating with harmonic frequencies of distress. "The conquest of galactic civilization," Ambassador K whispered, and for the first time in recorded history, her proud voice carried notes of genuine fear. "They haven't been contained. They've been preparing." High Counselor called for order as panic began to spread through the assembly. Representatives were already activating emergency communications to warning their governments to prepare for war. But even as they transmitted their warnings, several council members noticed something disturbing about their communication systems. The quantum entanglement networks that connected the galaxy were responding faster than they should. Messages that normally required hours to cross galactic distances were being acknowledged in minutes. Data compression was occurring at rates that exceeded known technological limits. Ambassador, as of the Silicon Syndicate, was the first to voice the growing suspicion. "Council members, when did your communication systems receive their last software updates?" A chill spread through the assembly as representatives checked their systems. The updates had been subtle, incorporating improvements that seemed like natural technological advancement. But now, viewed in the context of what they had learned about human capabilities, those updates took on a more sinister meaning. "They're already in our systems," stated, his ethereal form flickering with realization. "The reconnaissance ships didn't just bring back intelligence about human capabilities, they brought back human technology." The truth hit the assembly like a physical blow. While they had been debating whether to help or avoid humanity, human systems had been quietly infiltrating galactic infrastructure. The invasion hadn't begun when the reconnaissance ships returned. It had begun the moment they entered the Sol system. Before anyone could respond to this revelation, every communication system in the chamber activated simultaneously. The voice that emerged was unmistakably human, speaking in perfect galactic standard with an accent that suggested complete familiarity with every linguistic nuance. "Greetings, members of the Galactic Council. This is Admiral Sarah of the United Earth Defense Force. I trust you have reviewed the reports from your reconnaissance mission." The chamber erupted into chaos as delegates realized that the most secure facility in galactic civilization had been compromised. High Counselor attempted to activate emergency protocols, only to discover that the systems no longer responded to his commands. "Please remain calm," Admiral continued, her voice carrying an undertone of amusement that made the situation even more terrifying. "We have no intention of harming anyone present. However, we feel it is time for a more direct conversation about humanity's place in galactic affairs." The holographic displays throughout the chamber activated without authorization, showing real-time images of human fleets emerging from hidden bases throughout the galaxy. The scope of their expansion was staggering. They had established footholds in nearly every star system that galactic civilization considered unexplored or uninhabitable. "For 3,000 years, you have told yourselves that humanity was contained," Admiral continued. "You believed that our violence and unpredictability made us too dangerous for civilized society. You were not entirely wrong." The displays shifted to show human combat capabilities, that comprehension. Weapons that could manipulate the fundamental forces of reality. Ships that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously. soldiers who could survive in the vacuum of space and fight with weapons that turned matter itself into a tool of war. However, you made a critical error in your assessment, Admiral said, her voice taking on an edge that made every survival instinct in the chamber scream warnings. You assumed that our capacity for violence made us unfit for civilization. In reality, it makes us uniquely qualified to lead it. The images changed again, showing human colonies where multiple galactic species lived together in apparent harmony. But the delegates could see the subtle signs of control: human overseers monitoring every aspect of life, human technology regulating behavior, human protocols governing all interactions. We offer you the same choice we have offered others, Admiral announced. Join us willingly and benefit from technologies that will transform your civilizations. Your citizens will live longer, healthier lives. Your worlds will become more productive. Your societies will achieve levels of efficiency and harmony that you never thought possible. Ambassador K found her voice, though it trembled with barely controlled rage. And if we refuse? The holographic displays shifted one final time, showing the aftermath of what had happened to species that had rejected humanity's offer. Their worlds were not destroyed. They were transformed. The populations remained, but they had been so completely integrated into human systems that their original cultures existed only as carefully preserved historical exhibits. Refusal is, of course, your right, Admiral replied, her tone suggesting that refusal was not actually an option at all. However, we should point out that refusal would be inadvisable. The chamber's environmental systems suddenly shifted, demonstrating humanity's complete control over the Council's most secure facility. Temperature fluctuations that would be lethal to different species cycled through the room in seconds, making it clear that humanity could eliminate every delegate present without firing a single shot. We are not conquerors in the traditional sense, Admiral continued as the environmental systems returned to normal. We are integrators. We take what works from each civilization and incorporate it into a greater whole. Your species, your technologies, your cultures, all will be preserved and enhanced. Enhanced according to human standards, High Counselor managed to say, his ethereal form flickering with patterns of resignation. Correct, we have studied galactic civilization for 3 and identified numerous inefficiencies and sources of conflict. Under human guidance, these issues will be resolved. The delegates could see the future that Admiral was describing. It was not extinction. It was something far more subtle and complete. Humanity would not destroy galactic civilization. They would perfect it according to their own design, and every species would find themselves grateful for the improvement even as they lost everything that had made them unique. You have 48 hours to deliver your decisions, Admiral announced. Each government may choose integration or alternative arrangements. We recommend integration. The communication systems deactivated as abruptly as they had engaged, leaving the council chamber in stunned silence. The delegates sat in the darkness of their new reality, understanding that they were no longer the leaders of galactic civilization. They were middle management in a human empire that had been building itself around them for 3,000 years. High Counselor was the first to speak. How many worlds do we estimate are already under human control? Ambassador N consulted his mechanical systems, though everyone suspected the data had already been compromised by human infiltration. Based on the reconnaissance reports and what we just witnessed, at least 30% of known space, probably more. And how many of our member species have been integrated? The answer came not from any delegate, but from human systems that had apparently been monitoring the conversation. Currently, 47 species are operating under full integration protocols. 93 additional species are in various stages of voluntary adoption of human technologies. The remaining species, including all those present in this chamber, are classified as pending integration. The delegates realized that their governments would receive not ultimatums, but invitations to formalize arrangements that were already in place. Humanity hadn't conquered the galaxy. They had inherited it by making it dependent on technologies and systems that no one had realized were human in origin. As the council session ended, and delegates prepared to return to there with news of their new reality, none of them spoke about the fundamental truth that everyone understood. Humanity's reputation for violence and unpredictability had been accurate. But they had channeled that capacity for destruction into something far more dangerous than warfare. They had become the galaxy's architects, redesigning civilization itself while making everyone believe it was happening naturally. The age of human dominance hadn't begun with the false distress signal. It had begun 3,000 years ago, the moment humanity realized that true conquest didn't require defeating your enemies. It required making them believe they had never been enemies at all. The galaxy would wake up tomorrow to discover that it had been speaking human languages, using human technologies, and following human protocols for longer than anyone could remember. And by the time they understood what had happened, they would find themselves grateful for the transformation. After all, the humans had made everything so much better.